It is conference championship weekend, and we are down to our final four teams: the Bengals, the Chiefs, the 49ers, and the Rams. Johnny Talk Sports here to bring you my conference championship weekend predictions. And before I get into those predictions, I just got to acknowledge the football that we saw this past weekend. All four games coming down to the final play of the game. Three of the four games won on a walk-off game-winning field goal. And the Bills and Chiefs, that, in my opinion, was the game of the year. I knew that game was going to be a shootout, but I had no idea it'd be a shootout that good, that exciting, that dramatic, that thrilling. All four games last week decided by a total of 15 points, and that is a record low for a divisional round. I think that might be a record low for a playoff round with more than two games. And I hope that the games this weekend, I hope they can match up to the drama and excitement that we saw last week. But I don't want to get my hopes up. Sometimes when we have an exciting week, the next week it's usually blowout weekend. And I hope we don't see that, especially because there's only 3 football games left in the football season. Although the USFL does begin, I believe it's April 15th or April 16th. But I don't know if I'm going to watch the USFL, to be honest with you. It probably wouldn't look the same. But let's get into the conference championship weekend predictions. Kicking things off with the Bengals and the Chiefs, a rematch of Week 17, where the Bengals came out on top by a score of 34-31 on a game-winning field goal by Evan McPherson, who right now I think is the playoff MVP for this Bengals team, as he has not missed a single kick all postseason, including making the game-winning field goal against the Titans last week to send the Bengals to the AFC title game. There was a statement that Joe Burrow made earlier in the year about how he's not fazed or bothered by the crowd noise while on the road, because he said that he adapted to crowd noise by playing in the SEC. However, this is the loudest crowd in the National Football League. Chiefs Kingdom is always loud. They'll harass any quarterback. Any quarterback will feel harassed by the crowd noise at Arrowhead Stadium. And speaking of harassment, last week Joe Burrow was sacked 9 times in the win against the Titans. And no matter who was going to come out of the Chiefs and Bills game in what was, in my opinion, the game of the year, that defense was going to have a feast just thinking about the Bengals getting Joe Burrow sacked 9 times. Because the offensive line just has been really inconsistent for the Bengals all season long. And there's always a question that gets asked on if the Bengals should have drafted Penei Sewell over Jamar Chase. And the answer to that question is absolutely not. Because Jamar Chase was the best receiver in last year's draft class. And in my opinion, I think he's the best receiver in the last 2 to 3 draft classes. So that is really saying something. Despite the season that Jamar Chase has had with the Bengals being the top target for Joe Burrow, that some people still question if the Bengals should have taken Sewell over Chase. Now for the Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes is 7-1 at home in the playoffs in his career. Only loss was to the Patriots in that overtime game where things were really starting to get controversial, as that was the starting point of the conversation on should they change the overtime rules. And despite the 3-4 start to the year, the Chiefs, they've been my favorite to win the Super Bowl the entire year. As since the 3-4 start, Patrick Mahomes has been playing a lot better as he realized that he doesn't have to make all these crazy plays happen every single week. He just needs to be the quarterback that they drafted him to be. And that is a quarterback that can win games. Because remember, the Chiefs, they were already playoff contenders before they even traded up to get Mahomes. They just needed a quarterback that could get them wins in the playoffs. And that's what Patrick Mahomes has done so far. It helps when you have arguably the best tight end in the league in Travis Kelce, which some people think that he is, some people think that he's not. Also helps when you have speed and Tyreek Hill. So when you have those two pieces of talent with you, it's going to help you win a lot of playoff games. Now, here's my prediction here for this game. The Chiefs right now are a 7-point favorite. I do think this game has the potential of being a shootout. I anticipate this being a high-scoring game. As I think the Bengals defense is underrated. I don't think they really get talked about as much because it gets overshadowed by Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, Joe Mixon. I don't think the Bengals defense gets talked about a lot. Led by Trey Hendrickson and Jesse Bates. And I think it's simply going to come down to the Bengals offensive line. If Joe Burrow, if he gets protected really well in this game, and if he doesn't get sacked at all, then I think the Bengals will win. But if he gets sacked 9 times again this week, then I think the Chiefs will win. If he gets sacked more than 2 to 3 times, I think the Chiefs will win. Well, Jamar Chase had a feast in the Week 17 game. 266 yards and 3 touchdowns. Joe Burrow had a feast against the Chiefs defense in the first game as well. 446 passing yards and 4 touchdowns. But I think Joe Burrow gets sacked about 4 or 5 times this game, and the Chiefs win by a score of 37 to 31. I think the Bengals, they just cover that spread, but I think the Chiefs still get the win and will advance to the Super Bowl. We have an all NFC West NFC title game, the 49ers and the Rams. The 49ers swept the Rams in the regular season. The first game was in dominant fashion, and in the second game, the 49ers needed to win that game to advance to the playoffs. And they found themselves down 17-0 early in that game. And they rallied all the way back to win it in overtime to clinch their playoff spot. And the 49ers, they are the second hottest team in the league behind the Chiefs, in my opinion. It was a slow start to the year for the 49ers. They had a big lead against the Lions in Week 1, and then they only won by 8 points. Then after the second game against the Eagles, a heartbreaking loss to the Packers in Week 3 on Sunday Night Football, they started to go on a losing streak. They started to struggle. Part of it was mainly because of injuries they were dealing with. And once they started to get healthier, the better they became. But our injuries starting to pile up for the 49ers again. As Deebo Samuel got banged up in the Packer game last week, it appeared that George Kittle did at some point, but I think George Kittle will be fine. Ambry Thomas is questioned for the game. He didn't play against the Packers last week. Trent Williams, one of their best offensive linemen, questionable for this game. But I think he will play in this game. While the Rams, there are some injuries as well. Taylor Rapp, questionable for this game. Andrew Whitworth, questionable for this game. He didn't play last week against Tampa Bay. His backup, Joel Noteboom, he's questionable for this game as well. So there are some injuries to be concerned about on both sides. In the 2 games against the 49ers, Matthew Stafford combined 4 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. And both of those games were some of his lowest performances of the year, despite the 2 touchdown passes in each of those games. He didn't look that good statistically in those games, is what I'm trying to say. However, in the postseason so far, 4 touchdown passes and no interceptions. And I will be honest with you, I don't know who to pick in this game. Do I go with the 49ers, who have been, in my opinion, the second hottest team in the league behind the Chiefs, and I've already picked the Chiefs to advance the Super Bowl earlier in this prediction video? Or do I pick the Rams, who I have faded the last 2 weeks, and they've been the only game that I've missed throughout the entire playoffs? I'm 8-2 in playoff predictions, and my 2 losses were the Rams. So do I fade the Rams for a third time, or do I pick the Rams? Because it seems like almost every time I pick the Rams to win a game against a team that is competitive, they seem to lose. So I'm probably going to regret this pick, but I am going to pick the Rams to win this in a close game. I think that both defenses are going to show out in this game, and I think we're going to be in for a pretty low-scoring game, which is really hard to believe considering the offenses that we have seen. The 49ers running game led by Elijah Mitchell, the rookie, and the Rams offense led by Matthew Stafford. So it's really hard to believe to think that this is going to be a low-scoring game, but I think it's going to. I just think that both defenses are going to show up in this game. They're going to leave everything out there. And by a final score of 20-13, I think the Rams advance to the Super Bowl to take on the Chiefs. I think Cooper Kupp has the game-winning touchdown. Well, the go-ahead touchdown, which is essentially the game-winning touchdown, with about 3 minutes left, and I just don't think Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be able to respond. So that will do it for my conference championship weekend predictions. Comment your predictions down below. Like, share, comment, subscribe. Until next time, have a wonderful day.